Hey everybody, Andrew Walker here. I hope that you will listen to everything you're about to hear right now. It's an incredibly important story. We're here talking about another senseless murder on our streets of George Floyd. You've probably seen him in the news. He's been on every news outlet. You've seen what has happened. You've seen the incident. It's really tough to talk about without crying. But we saw a man with a white cop kneeling on his neck. And all he was doing was he was writing a bad check. So what? During a pandemic. Who cares? But we saw this cop leaning on this man's neck for minutes upon minutes as he cried out for his life. Now he's dead. And so you got to ask yourself, how much of this are we going to take before something changes? Before something changes. I hope you can understand me. I apologize for crying, but when you watch the video, how can you do anything less? And so I want this to be a serious video for you to watch and just think about what you're going to hear. Here we are, we're in a nation where we're hoping that racial divides will get smaller. And events like this just make it worse. It makes it so frustrating, so difficult to navigate when you watch this. There's not much you can say. But listen, I have something very exciting to show you tonight. Exciting in the way that I pray God will get your heart. Because with me tonight are the perspectives of three men that will have the most important perspective you can have on this issue. What better perspective could you possibly get than three African-American males about close to the same age as George Floyd who have been former law enforcement officers? I know there's a lot of you out there with opinions, lashing out at people, but what you're about to hear is the best perspective that you can get. I'm the same age as George Floyd. There's a lot of things in my life I'd like to do. And George won't have that opportunity for simply writing a bad check. It's unbelievable. But I want to introduce you to three men who are my friends, my brothers, that I know very well. And I'll get some Kleenex when the camera pans. But if we could just move right over here. I want these men to introduce themselves to you and just give you a little bit of who they are. And then I want them to talk about what this means to them, how this impacts their life, how this impacts our nation. How in the world can a man sit on somebody's neck for 10 minutes as he begs for his life? It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it is. First of all, my name is Dwayne Edwards. I was a police officer in the city of Milwaukee. I spent almost 7 years on the force before I was taken off the job for a condition with my eyes. I have RP. But while I was on the force, I actually held a couple of different positions, both of which were on the street. The first few years as a young officer, I was a patrol officer. And the last half of my career, I was a traffic enforcement officer riding the motorcycles. Two very different jobs in the same department, but I still saw a lot of the same stuff, you know, and it's, I don't know, I just want to say, I mean, I'm mad. I'm angry. I'm embarrassed. I guess there's a little shame in there because I love police officers. Police officers have a very, very difficult job to do. While everyone is running away from the bullets, police officers are running toward the bullets. And it's a job that is it's, you know, 98% boredom and 2% stark terror. But our training helps us to deal with that. And when I see what I saw, it bothers me beyond belief. And I just, I got to be careful and kind of temper myself, because I have a lot of emotions going on with it, because this is not something new. This has been happening for hundreds of years. It's just a different season that it's happening in. And I just have I hear the Holy Spirit telling me that it's time for me to stand up and help it to stop. And I don't know what that looks like, but I just feel like I'm supposed to help to get rid of this, whatever it is.
Hi, my name is Ron. Everybody calls me Ron here. I've been a part of the Lake County Sheriff Department for about the same length of time as Dwayne, maybe 5 or 6 years. And my job was a little bit different from Dwayne. I was in the streets, but not as a patrolman, but I worked more on the jail side. My career started on the jail side, and then I went into the work release unit, to where I had to go out and be the one to supervise inmates on the highways, or they had jobs, they were allowed jobs. So I had to take them to the stores, things like that, to get their toiletries. They cleaned up the park, so I had to patrol them as they do that. So we had the same authority as a patrolman, because it's the same training, same academy and things like that. So with that, my job, more so on the inside rather than the outside, is just as dangerous as his, except for my job, I almost had to fight every day. So training is always crammed into you. And when you look at a video like you saw with George Floyd and the officer, he looks like he's a veteran officer. He looks like he may have been on the force for quite some time. Which I'm trying to say is, that being said, he should have known protocol. He should have known what is a proper takedown maneuver or hold tactic, because that is crammed into you almost daily. Training. And in a lot of different agencies, that particular maneuver that he did is illegal. It's an illegal hold, especially when you're in cuffs. So there are certain maneuvers that I would see my fellow officers use on a person. For instance, if you're in handcuffs, your arms are behind your back, and you take your arm through his arm and shoulder, place your hand on his shoulder and lift up. That would put that inmate or that subject on their tippy toes, because you're dealing with the shoulder joints, and it's a pinch point. So we're trained what hold and how to effectively subdue a person. So the way we were trained in the training there, some people in the public, they didn't understand, why is there so many officers at the scene? It does a lot of things on the officer side. It's for protection for the officer, but also for the protection of the subject. So on the officer's side, everybody is assigned to a limb. So you have one officer that's assigned to a leg, arm, the core, and the head. But also the what we call officer's presence, it also cuts back on the public getting involved or maybe tampering with evidence or anything on the scene that could cause this to go even worse. But the use of force, he should have been trained properly on how to apply force, especially when it comes to the windpipe. So, like I said earlier, this had to be something else. Sometimes citizens are marked, sometimes, and we don't even have to use the race card. Sometimes people are just marked, because maybe you should not be in this area, or maybe it's the type of car you're driving. I can remember growing up, we would get pulled over because we had baseball caps on, and the car was like 4 deep, four guys, two in the front and two in the back, and everybody was wearing baseball caps. So we had to figure out how could we maneuver around in the city without getting pulled over. So we would take our caps off to keep from getting, hit or pulled over or being harassed. Really, is what it really was. So it's a lot that happens. So a lot of the public say, well, why does it take these many officers? It's because they're assigned to each limb. And like you said earlier, verbal judo and all those things are to protect that person. Because in the officer's perspective, they have families. And what a lot of the public doesn't realize, not trying to take up for the gentleman, the officer, I think he's totally wrong. But we have families also and children. So most of the time in briefing, we would say we're going home today, because you never knew with this career, you never knew when your life was going to be on the line. I lost a lot of friends. Some of them were rookies. Some of them, were cocky. And a lot of my friends who were cocky were the ones who ended up dead. Domestic violence is one of the worst calls that you can get. I've seen situations where a domestic call will come and the wife called the police, and the police shows up, the police handles the business, and the wife turns on the police. Now you got two people fighting against the police. So this is the reason for police presence. It doesn't look right, but it's for the safety of the officer, and it's supposed to be for the safety of the subject that's been apprehended. You want to say something? Sure.
I am Zabrian Carter. I was a 10-year veteran, a corporal for the Lake County Sheriff's Department as well. And during that time, I've seen a lot of things and a lot of scenarios. But I want to say today, we're dealing with a different type of police officer. And from what I've heard, I've seen films like Byron said on domestic violence, but this is the type of job that you cannot take because you want to put bread and butter on the table. This job is the type of job to protect and serve your communities. And it can't, there's a lot of things that fuel it, racial violence and discrimination because of your creed or color of skin. And in my opinion, I feel that we need more believers in this line of work. Because yes, we know things, we're in a day and world today where the enemy is rapidly doing things, and it's a modern day racism where he's using police officers behind the badge to hurt and bring harm to people. And these officers that abuse their powers and authority are usually the ones that were bullied or beat up in high school or taken advantage of, and now they feel like they're going to take this aggression back on somebody who has less authority than themselves. Because I was one who would de-escalate situations. I worked in the courts. I drove a squad car out in the field. I worked in different cities, but a lot of times different courtrooms. And I was also a bailiff. But what I saw was I would be the type of person to check you in when you come in the building and keep the peace in the government center. But fights de-escalated, things broke out from time to time, where I had to be the one to jump right in. But I would calm the situation because I was the type of person, when I went to work, I took God with me. And God just kept me safe in situations and gave me what to say to people. And that's how I developed a reputation with the judges, with the attorneys, with the lawyers, because I would talk to these people and say, hey, you go in this way, it's going to come out this way. If you listen to me, I can help you out. I know everybody in this building, and I have a lot of respect with them, and they had a lot of respect with me. I worked under 3 sheriffs, and I had a position that a lot of them didn't like because of the way I did things. They moved me around, but they couldn't do the things successfully that they wanted to do. And it's just, in this line of work, you have to be careful, you have to use wisdom. Sometimes I had to fight, sometimes I had to chase people. But I would warn them beforehand. Look, I'm not here to abuse my power or authority, but I'm just letting you know this is the way it's going to happen now. And if you don't want to understand that, then this is what's going to happen next. And when I would have to call for others, we would just bring the matter down, just de-escalate the matter. But in my opinion, you don't have to put your neck on a gentleman's throat, or you don't have to shoot a gentleman because he's black running in the community. What happened to stop, let me see your hands, or ask questions. I know officer only has 3 seconds to think, but that's only when your life is in danger. You have 3 seconds. We all want to go home to our families at night. But if you tell a person to put their hands in the air, just because it's holding a cell phone is not a gun. Make sure you're on top of the matter or situation before you just go in and start using brutal force. We were trained the only time when you use force is when your life is in jeopardy or you've been threatened or the immunity threat that coming to you with the weapon. Because if you draw that weapon, now you have to use it. And it's going to be a report done on you and that weapon. So you want to be justified for your actions, because you will go to court and they will turn that on you if you're not justified for your actions and what you've done. But it's just, to me, that's just one of my opinions, that you don't have to have violence. It's a better way to address these issues and matters, no matter what race, what color, or what creed of skin that you are. But it's just some of the officers are doing it for the wrong reasons. They're out trying to take care of families. That's not that type of job. You're protecting and serving a community, no matter who you are. You took that oath. You sworn that you would do this job and protect all, not some, or not because this neighborhood is a poor neighborhood. What are you doing over here in our neighborhood on the rich end of town? You should be able to go anywhere in this country. You should be able to go wherever you want to go and not be bothered or not be harassed. That was one of the reasons why I got involved and became an officer, because we got tired of being pulled over and stopped for no unjust reason. So I said, when I become an officer, I'm going to come in and make a difference.
That's good. I wanted to ask a question to the 3 of you. So George is handcuffed already. So if he would have simply been put into the car, now he's not a threat. You can get it. Is that something that you guys would generally do? When you handcuff somebody, you put them into the car, right? And they're subdued in the car. Could it have been possible? So just imagine it's us 4 out there with George. Okay, he's big, so what? So are we. And there's 4 of us. No one man, I don't care how big you are, is going to handle 4 people. What if we had put him in the squad car? Okay, we know he's there writing a bad check. What if we had asked him, hey George, why are you writing a bad check? It's a pandemic. Obviously, there's a million reasons why you could be writing a bad check. You're in the middle of a pandemic, right? People are having a real hard time getting unemployment. A lot of financial situations are going on. What if we 4 had said, George, how much are you short? How much money do you need? What if we had some money in our pockets and we could simply put the money together and give it to him? Take him out of the cuffs, bring him back in and say, would you guys be willing to drop the charges on George? He's short. Don't worry, we got the money, we gave it to him. Would you let him go? You know that they would say yes. What I'm asking you guys is, would that be a possibility? Is that something officers can do?
Absolutely. It's according to the officer's discretion. The video doesn't show. Obviously, they made the call. We had a system called the Spillman system, and once you went through the system, if it gotten high up, depends on how bad the situation is, but most of the time it's the officer's discretion on how he wants to handle it. There's protocol that's in place on how to handle things on different levels, but for the most part, it was up to the ranking officer that was on the scene. What do you think?
I agree. I've actually seen it happen on the job, where officers came out of their own pockets to buy a meal for somebody who was homeless and somebody who was, causing a problem. And a lot of times, people cause problems so they're not on the street anymore. A lot of homeless people will start, a scene so the police can show up, especially in some places cold as Wisconsin. I mean, it's 30 below. I mean, yeah, I want the cops to come get me off the street. And but there have been I've seen a few times where cops have pulled out their pocket and taken somebody to McDonald's or something, and those aren't the things you see. We're never going to see that on the news. And we can talk about that too, but yeah, Ron is right. It's officers' discretion, and I don't think the departments they don't frown on it, but they don't really condone it. You know, it's one of those things where if that's something you do, you're doing it out of the goodness of your own heart, and it's probably going to stay on the down low. You know.
So Dwayne, or all three of you guys, that would be under the serve portion of what's written on the car.
Yeah.
Serve. Protect we get, but do you guys feel that a lot of the serve portion of officers is missing, or something not even taught? Is a lot of training just on force and levels of force or no force, or this kind of thing? How much of the serve the community do you think is taught, and then how much do you think could be taught?
Wow, that's a good question. I think a lot more could be taught. I think we have one of the issues we have with these police department, law enforcement agencies, I really do believe is training. Now, when I see this gentleman on the, you said before, if the four of us were there and he was, what if we had him on the ground? Well, training tells us that when we have someone on the ground and they're cuffed, we're supposed to roll them over on their side so they can breathe. Training also tells us that when that person starts struggling, it's probably because they're trying to survive. When someone's pressing down, you got weight on your chest or weight on your neck, you can't breathe. It's a natural human instinct to fight for your life. And that's all he was doing. And, we're about to get into this. We're about to get into this. And do you know, a lot of people don't know but when an officer, first I'm sorry if I'm not answering your question, but the Holy Spirit's hit me. So, we talked about the firearm. Why do officers carry guns? They have a gun on their hip for this reason. It's in defense of surprise attacks. In defense of surprise attacks. When you're walking up to a situation, anything can happen. But when you're not going to kill me with a check. You understand what I'm saying? You're not going to kill me. So there are cops, and I said before, I love police. I love the position. But what some cops out there are doing now is absolutely ridiculous. And I said this before we started talking. I said there's two trains of thought here for me. One, there's not enough training provided to the officer, and that's going to be on the municipality in charge. Or two, there's officers out there taking any opportunity they can get to kill a black man. That's just truth. I'm sorry, and people want to get offended and defensive about it, but it's not you that's dying out there in the street. I've read a lot of posts, seen some posts come down, and they talk about what has occurred, and then there's always somebody defending cops. This is not about cops. This is about this one officer who did this one thing to this black man, and he shouldn't have did it. Let's talk about that. Let's get to the bottom of that. And even worse, almost just as worse, is the cops standing around watching it happen, doing nothing. Now we talk about we're a kingdom people. There's people all over this country talking about how much they're a Christian, and how can you be a Christian or even a human being and allow this to happen? We need to stand up, not just black or people of color, but people, white people too, and we need to say, you know what, enough is enough. Because we talk about, hey, let's make this country great again. Hey, three perspectives here. I'm only talking about one. When was it great? When was it great for us? You understand what I'm saying? Because the perspective I have is black people have always been getting beat on, always getting dogs sicked on them. There's always something going on that's holding us down. And if you don't think it's still happening, start reading your articles, read a book, do your research. They talk about, me and my wife were talking about reparations. And I said, I don't need your reparations. You know what? Leave me alone. How about that? Leave me alone. Let me go to the store. You know what I'm saying?
How about this? If we all remember the incident, I don't have my facts straight, so I'm not going to quote, but there was an incident in a church where a young kid went in and shot up the church. Just wasn't that long ago. But I do remember the fact that kid was a Caucasian, I believe.
Yeah.
And when they subdued him, he was cuffed, but he also had a bulletproof vest walking out. He lived, right. So had this gentleman been another color, he probably would have lived. But going back to the use of force, again, training. When I was training, they taught us what was the appropriate use of force. We never was supposed to block the windpipe. He was already cuffed, so only way we were supposed to use a weapon, whether it be mace or club or taser, is if there was a direct, imminent threat. So this gentleman was on the ground, cuffed. Only thing he could do was spit, maybe kick. But you have 4 other officers, if they were doing their jobs correctly, one would have been on each foot. They had him in cuffs, so the gentleman should never have had his knee on his neck. It should have been on his shoulder. Not even the spine, because he could become paralyzed. But what got me when I saw the video, this gentleman, the officer that applied the force to his neck, that was just totally wrong procedures. This is what was making a lot of people in the public believe that it was racially motivated, because the gentleman was dead and he still had the knee on his neck. He pleaded and begged for his life. He called for his mother. The public was pleading with the officers, and I would like to see the gentleman that was standing around. He did nothing. And I understand when you're dealing with the officer's side, there's a brotherhood. You got FOP. There's a brotherhood. We watch each other's back. But what I don't like and what I've seen a lot of is some officers, if you talk too much, you could end up maybe your house broken into, something, you could be threatened, because there are corrupt officers out there that will and capable of doing things, threatening your families. So there is a relationship. If we were on the agency, there's a brotherhood type of a situation, which is why he probably stood by and did nothing. So I would like to see the other 3 officers brought under charges also, because he did nothing, he said nothing, and we watched a man in live, real time die.